So one of the things that I think holds us back in all areas of life, and I know you can speak to this, but it certainly holds a lot of people back in their love lives. I know it did me, is
Yeah,
fear, right?
sure.
And fear is something, there's the acronym that says it's false evidence appearing real and all of those kinds of things. And yet our fears can feel very, very real, and they can hold us back, and they can definitely have a hold on us. And some of those things are based in things from the past, or some of those things are based on maybe what happened in the past that we might anticipate might happen in the future, like maybe rejection or disappointment or heartbreak or relationships that didn't work out or that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But I want you to speak a little bit to fear, because I know you personally well enough to know you've had to push through some times of tremendous fear. Like I can remember us having the conversation when you'd been through that period of time where you couldn't even breathe. Like
Yeah,
breathing was such a struggle. And I can't even imagine how fearful, how scary that must have been.
yeah. It's terrifying, right? Sometimes when you can't take a breath. I was uh this is going to be relevant. One of my favorite things to do is indoor skydiving. It's amazing. You just have this feeling of being able to fly and be free, and it's safe, and you're not falling 13,000 feet through 13,000 feet of air. Hopefully keeping your fingers crossed that the parachute's going to open on the way towards the bottom.
Yeah.
So indoor skydiving is super fun. When they took me in the very first time, they took me in and they said, "Look, we don't know what your body type is going to do in the wind tunnel. So we're going to bring you in, set you down on the net, right? That you can walk on, or you can go horizontal and float and fly, right? So if you're vertical, you won't fly, but if you're horizontal, you will." So they said, "We're going to walk you out and set you on the net and make sure that we get a feel for what your body's going to do in the wind." And I said, "Yeah, okay." They brought me in, set me chest down, and they basically were kneeling beside me, holding me down on the net, trying to figure out what was going to happen. But the problem is, the wind was 4 jet engines above us, and it's an open port below you. So it sucks in all this wind and air from the outside. And it's so powerful and so strong, I couldn't exhale. I
Mm.
didn't know that you can suffocate if you can't exhale. I was
Wow.
assuming you only suffocate if you can't inhale, but I didn't have the strength, my diaphragm, to exhale against the force of 4 jet engines above me and I literally was like starting to panic. I was afraid like I was going to pass out. I couldn't breathe. I don't know that my mind went like to the point of I'm going to die, but it went to the panic point of I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Right. And they couldn't hear me say, "You got to get me up," because I couldn't express it verbally because I couldn't push any air out of my lungs. Right. B, they had earplugs in and helmets and the sound of 4 jet engines. So they wouldn't have heard me anyway. Right. So I kept saying like, right, I'm trying to mouth the words, "You got to get me up. You got to get me up. You got to get me off this mat." Right. And they're like, what? And I'm like, this is not going well. And my vision started to black out. And as my vision started to black out, like all the peripheral vision started to go and I'm like throwing my head up, like, "Get me up." Right. Like, really, you got to get me up. Finally, as soon as they lifted me, what happened was that there's a door in the tunnel where you enter and exit from the wind tunnel. And I think that released just enough pressure that all of a sudden I could exhale. And then I was flying. And it was
Wow.
beautiful. And it was easy and it was free. And it was something I've never felt before because of the limitations of my physicality. Um, what this means for your audience listening is there's something you are experiencing and you're not expressing yourself fully. And that fear is signaling to you that something needs adjusted, right? And so for me, it was we had to create enough space with some of the wind coming out of the wind tunnel through that doorway that it allowed me to be able to exhale and breathe. Okay. So when you're experiencing fear, we have to find something to let go of. We have to recognize that, okay, I'm afraid of like being judged, or I'm afraid of being turned down. So if I walk up and talk to this person who I find attractive I'd like to maybe go out with them once or twice and just see if there might be something here, and I'm scared. The problem is we're holding tight and fast. We're stuck on the net, right? We're being held down by that fear. And let me think. I wanted to come through me instead of from you. So give me a sec, because I'm starting to get myself tangled. Okay. So what wants to be said is that when we're in fear, we're holding fast to the what if of the future, because we may have experienced it in the past, like you said, or we may have created an idea of what could happen in the future. So we're holding on to the what if of the future, but we're only holding on to the negative. And the moment we let go of that, what all opens up? All of a sudden, there's freedom. There's all kinds of choice. But if we hold fast and we're attached to that fear, we're attached to that possible outcome, we're afraid that that judgment is going to be there. We're afraid that somebody is going to reject us. And so because of that, we say, well, I'm probably going to be rejected anyway, so I'm not going to do it. You're denying your own authenticity. You're not acting with integrity. You're acting out of fear. You're letting fear dictate who you are. In that moment, remember I said there are two kinds of people in the world. There are free people and there are slaves. In that moment, you're in reaction. That fear is creating a reaction. A reaction is a slave action. In that moment, you're enslaved. However, just by flipping it and saying, you know what, I'm going to let go of that. And you always have to let go of something to embrace something new. You always have to let go of something, fear in this case, or internal resistance, or the what ifs of the future, to embrace something new. And what's that new thing that you may be embracing? What if you embrace, okay, you know what? I'm afraid of rejection. Let me just set down rejection and let me embrace a real possibility of an interesting conversation. Instead of like holding on to like, well, I like them and I want them to like me too. What if I let go of, I want them to like me too? And I just embrace, you know what? I just want to see if they're an interesting person. I just want to go and have a really fascinating conversation with them, right? Because the fascinating conversation creates connection. Mm-hmm. And so when we're attached to what we want and we're afraid that the outcome is not going to give us what we want, we'll hold fast to this fear because we're afraid it's not going to happen out there. So let me stay here and be in protection mode. It's just your unconscious mind saying that could hurt. So we're going to stay here. That could embarrass you. So we're going to stay here. That could cause you problems, right? Somebody could judge you. So I'm going to stay here. I don't want to stay here. You don't want to stay here. Let this go. Let the fear go and say, you know what? Let me exchange something that is protecting me. And thank you. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be rejected. But what do I want? I'd love to see if I can have an interesting conversation, because maybe they're attractive and I get there and they're dumb as a brick. They're not even interesting. Right? Like I've literally talked to women that I found attractive. And as soon as they started talking about sports or cars, which you would stereotypically think as a dude I'd love, oh, it was terrible. Horrible. And then I found people that I thought, oh, there's no way that this person and I are ever going to be able to connect. And we started a conversation about something super deep and delicious. And I'm like, this person's amazing. So we're not going to know until we give them a shot, right? And
yeah, so true.
Give them shots, we have to let go of something. So we can choose to hold on to the fear and be attached to the fear and let it dictate and limit us. Or we can say, you know what, let me just set the fear here. I can come back for it anytime I want. Or I can just let it here and let me embrace a possibility. Let the possibility be a conversation. Let me just see if I can find something interesting with them. Let me see if they like the same kinds of things that I do. I like what they're wearing. Let me find out a little bit more about that. Like, this is an amazing outfit. What caused you to choose this today? Like, or, you know, how does it make you feel when you dress like this? You look amazing, right? Why did you choose that color? It's so great for your skin. Whatever it is. I mean, these are just things that I'm pulling out of the top of my head right now. And probably truthfully, because I love style and fashion. And I was watching some style YouTube videos last night. And so I think they're still stuck in my head. So I think that's where that's coming from. But the point is that I want to find a conversation. The people listening, want to find something that you want to exchange the fear for. What would you rather have? You can come back to the fear. But let's just make a willing exchange. Okay? You're not sacrificing anything. Fear is still going to be here if you want it. You're just making a willing exchange for something that you want more. What do you want more? A friend of mine has social anxiety. Kind, loving, generous, good man. But he has social anxiety. And I said, hey man, now that you've shifted your shift, because he's a nurse and he was working on weekends, I said, and this is your second weekend where you actually have weekends off. What is your plan for this weekend? He's like, well, I think I'm going to go to a bar. And I was like, what? And he said, because he doesn't even drink. He said, I think I'm going to go to a bar. And I said, a bar? You don't even drink? And he goes, well, it's more like one of those like outdoor bar eating places. And I was like, okay. I said, don't you? And we talked a little bit more. And I said, the essence of what we talked about was, buddy, that's like trying to go from 0 to 100. That's an epically difficult place to introduce yourself and meet other people, right? And he's not even trying to meet women. He's just trying to meet people and make friends. And I said, people go to a bar or a restaurant or a club with their friends, right? If you see them looking around, they're looking around to see if there's anybody else attractive that might be looking at them. But the chance of them actually walking across the bar or the restaurant and saying hello is really, really slim. And so the opportunity for you to get into a small group of people at a table or at the bar and start a conversation with them, it's really difficult. If you don't have mad charismatic skills, if you're not really great with the gift of gab, if you're not demonstrating real interest in people and great at starting conversations, if you get worried to even say hello to people, this is not the first place to start. I said, instead, why don't we just start with something simple? Why don't you find a meetup group that's doing something that you like? You love hiking, right? So let's just see if there's a place for you to go hiking. And he's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm like, yeah, makes a ton of sense. You don't want to go from 0 to 100 and expect to be successful. You're just going to set yourself up for failure because you're afraid. Because you're afraid to actually step forward and make those social connections and make jokes and connect with people and ask them questions and be interesting and interested, right? Because you're afraid to do that, you're not going to do it. You're going to go to a bar, you're going to set yourself up for failure. Then you're just going to reflect on yourself and think, oh, I really am terrible at this. I'm never going to make friends. That's not the case at all. You just chose the wrong 0 to 100. Let's go 0 to like 1. What's one small change? What's one thing that you can exchange the fear for? That's a simple shift, a simple, well, let me just try this. Let me just make a compliment to somebody and tell them why, not just, oh, like, that's a really beautiful suit that you're wearing, but I really love that suit on you because ... Okay, so let's just take one tiny step. Okay, and then one next tiny step. And one next tiny step. Pretty soon the fear won't have any place to live because you won't need it anymore. But it's up to you, the conscious you, not up to the unconscious, to make that decision on how you want to move through your life, with fear or without fear. With fear, unconscious. Without fear, conscious and intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was so beautifully said. I love the idea of, if we're holding on so tight to fear, how can we have an open hand to receiving something different? So I love this idea of, what would I rather have instead? What would I like to exchange this fear for? Because I think that can help us to make even if they're baby steps, it can help us to make a step forward and not just hang on so tightly to this fear.
Yes, 100%.
So powerful.